So the first project that we are going to be working on is the wooden frame. So you want to take the back off of your frame and then you will set it aside. And you're going to want to take your home plate, the white, we'll open the lid here, and one of your plastic dishes. You want to give your paint a stir, and you want to put about 1 teaspoon of paint into your dish. And then we'll set that aside. You want to take your brush and dip it into the paint, and a nice layer all the way around your frame. Getting the edges. You can use, you can mix some water into your paint, or you can use it straight. For this workshop, we're just going to use the paint straight. And when you're layering your colors, you can put a dark color first or a light color first. It's just personal preference. The most common way actually is to have the darker on the bottom. So now once we have the whole frame covered, we're just going to take it and set it aside. So the next project we're working on is the terracotta pot, and in this project we are going to show the technique, the texture technique. So what you want to do is you want to just stipple, pounce the paint all over the terracotta pot. Now with this technique, you want to make sure that the paint is raised. So after I go over the whole pot, I will come back and just make some paint peaks. This is the texture technique, and it's great for hiding imperfections. So if you buy a piece off of the buy-in cells and it's missing like a corner of the dresser, or it has water damage, this is a great way to hide it, and it's also a great technique for giving a boring piece just some added funk. So I don't know if you can see the raised area here, but that's what we're looking for over the whole pot. And the more paint peaks you have, the better the technique will show. And then we'll set this guy aside. We'll go back to our frame and just make sure that we have any areas that we might have missed. We're just going to go over that and make sure that it's nice and covered. When you are doing the two-color technique, it's better that the bottom layer is just a little bit thicker than the top layer. And you might also notice that the first layer that you do might look like a kindergartner painted it, but that's okay. When we add more paint on top, it'll just fill everything all in. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our peacock, the darker bold color, take the lid off, give it a stir. We're going to put another teaspoon of paint into another dish. Now the reason why we're putting it into a separate dish is you don't want to dip your brush straight into the container, so you do want to pour into a separate dish. The last one we're going to work on is the jar. Take the lid off. Now painting a jar is the trickiest surface, so the tip to that is just a nice thin layer of paint and then let it dry before painting the next layer. So glass is similar to painting anything with a slippery surface. So IKEA furniture, plastic, that sort of thing. So there's the first layer. We're just going to set it aside and let it completely dry before we do anything else. And then we're going to go and head to back to our frame. and make sure it's dry. Actually, this guy's going to have to sit just a little bit longer. So to speed it up, you can take a hair dryer or the back of the frame and just speed it up. If you're working on a bigger project at home, you might want to wait like a couple hours before you do the next, just to make sure that it is really completely dry. Or if you have a hair dryer, you can use that just to speed it up. Okay, so we're just going to do a nice thin layer around the frame. We want to cover up all the white. Not thick, just nice and thin, yet covering all the white. The colors that we're using in this workshop are Peacock, beautiful color, and Home Plate, nice ivory white. So when you're doing the layering of colors, this is the 2-color layer, but you can layer as many colors as you want together. Just and a tip would be, if you are doing multiple colors, you can snap a little picture from your phone to refer to where to distress, do the distressing later, which is step 2. Right now we're just still on step 1, painting. Paint, distress, seal. Those are the 3 steps. And if we're going to be distressing, you don't really have to be completely perfect in covering it, as we will be pulling back the undercolor. So you want to make sure you get in the middle of your frame here and around all the edges. And we'll just set it aside and let it dry. Let's see here. And then the last, actually before we do the pot, we're going to do another layer on the jar. So you just want to, before you paint it again, you just want to make sure, just give it a light tap, that it is completely dry. Then we'll dip in our paint and do another layer. So again, just a reminder, the glass is like anything that would have a slippery finish. So it could be like a slippery varnish, plastic, metal, and you just want to make sure that it's completely dry before you add the next layer. And with the jar, you might have to do more than 2 layers, but you just keep slowly adding until you can't see through your jar. So we'll just set him aside again. And then we'll check our terracotta pot, and just to make sure it's all dry before we add our layer of paint. Just want to cover the whole thing, and again, it's on the second layer, it doesn't have to be thick, just as long as it's covering up the white. You can tell that these brushes carry a lot of the paint, so it does go quite far. You don't need very much on your brush. And then just pull it along. Okay, so we're going to do one more layer on the jar. Just when I hold it up, I can still see through it, so there's some areas that are a little bit light. So I'm just going to go ahead and do another layer just to fill that in. If you feel like it's pulled a lot of... If you feel like on your jar it's maybe in some areas just pulling off a little too much, you can just take your finger, dip it into the paint, and then just go to the area and just lightly tap. So now we're finished putting the darker color on all 3 projects, and we're finished the first step, which is painting. So just to recap, when using the products, there's 3 basic steps: paint, distress, and seal. So we have finished painting the wooden frame, the glass mason jar, and the terracotta pot, and we're ready to move on to the second step, which is distressing. Okay, so now we're moving on to step 2, which is distressing. And there's 2 ways to distress: with sandpaper or with a rag. And so on the frame, we're going to use the rag. And what you want to do is you want to get it just a little damp. I like to just wrap it around my finger a bit so I have more control. And just dip it into some water and give it a little wring so it's just damp. And then we're going to start working on the frame. Now when you think of distressing, you think of around the edges and where the piece would get naturally worn. You just want to apply pressure until you see that undercolor showing through. And if you're having a little difficulty pulling it up, you just want to stay in one area and just concentrate on just the raised part there. Can you see that coming through nicely? And you just want to work all the way around the frame, and you can hold it up and take a look at it and see if you need a little bit more. So you can use a sponge, you can use anything. A lint-free cloth is awesome. You can apply pressure until it goes all the way down to the original frame color, or just until the white. Moving along here. You can bunch it up too and use it, or you can wrap it around your finger. Once you do this, you can just get the feel of like what you like. Every time that you go to dip in the water again, though, I do recommend using just a different area of the white rag. This is my favorite part, doing the distressing. I feel this is when the piece just comes to life. Once you seal it, the colors are all going to pop nicely. Okay, so I think that looks good. We'll just go ahead and set them aside. And we're going to do the same thing on the jar. And you want to work on the areas that are raised. So on this jar, there's a little bits of detail of fruit. So we're going to do the same thing. Now, you have to be really careful when you're working on glass that you just lightly apply pressure and that your cloth is really damp. Remembering that it's a slippery surface. So you just want to just lightly apply pressure until it starts to show through. You can go all the way around your jar. Can you see that popping through there? Just rough it up, look like an aged, beautiful aged jar. You can do around the rim here. They're getting annoying. And just work with it until you think that you've got enough. You think that that's enough distressing, you're done. You want a little more, you can add more. So we'll just go ahead and leave him over here. Now the last project we have is the terracotta pot, and we're going to use the sandpaper on him. So you just want to do it over top of your placemat. It's a little bit messy, and you just want to go around in circular motion all over the pot. Just until you can start to see the white show through. Just want to give it a nice little sand here. You can sand all the way down to the pot, whatever you'd like. And then when you're done, we'll just take a cloth and just lightly dust all the chalk off. There we go, we're done step 2. The last step is sealing. So the sealer that we're going to be using is Top Coat, and it's the liquid sealer. And it's the easiest sealer that we have to use, and you just want a nice thin layer of sealer over each project. You don't want it to go on white, you want to make sure it's nicely smoothed out. And I'll go ahead and show you. So I'm just going to use our top coat that we have open. It's the large one, so they do come in both sizes here. So you just want to give it a nice gentle rock. You don't want to shake it so much that there's too many bubbles, but just a nice little rock. Open it up. Just a little bit. Now this goes a long way, so you just need a little bit in your dish. Now you want to take your foam brush and just lightly dip into the top coat. You have to be careful with the foam brush though, because it does absorb quite a bit. So you just want to just lightly dip in there, and then we're just going to do a nice thin layer around all of the projects. Again, you know you've put too much on is when you can see it going white. So just work it around and even it out. Make sure to do the sides. And when you hold it back, you'll be able to see if there's any spots that you missed. There, and doesn't that look awesome? I love how the top coat just makes it pop again. So now we're going to do a nice thin layer on the jar, remembering again that it's a slippery surface, so you just want light pressure. Lightly apply the top coat all the way around. If it goes white, just take your brush back over. If you're doing bigger projects that are going to get a lot of use, you want to use 3 to 4 layers of top coat. But in these little projects, 1 layer is enough. So there you can kind of see how it's white. I don't know if you can see from there. You just want to lightly just take your brush over it again. And then let it dry. And same on the last terracotta pot. Nice thin layer all the way around. When you're working on a bigger project, you can actually use a rag to apply the top coat, a foam brush, that sort of thing. And there you go. We are all done. Paint, distress, and seal, just like that.